Lifeline's Best Practices webinar this month of October. We have been delivering webinars on a monthly basis as well as a lot of other good materials throughout this year. And right now we are focusing on safety planning, particularly center application of safety. So we will also be looking ahead, just to mention, for next month, our topic will be noteworthy callers. So I would just like to put that on everyone's radar. Stay tuned for that date. I believe it will be November 12th. But if you are a center that feels confident with your policies, procedures, approaches, strategies in effectively working with noteworthy callers or chat visitors, which means repeat, frequent callers, as well as those who might be misusing the line or chat, I would love to hear from you. So just make a note of that. Okay, thank you for completing that poll question and for joining us today. Safety Planning Intervention Center Application. My name is Karen Carlucci with the Lifeline, and I will be one of the speakers today, and I'm also, of course, facilitating. So let's get started. We will first reviewing safety, basically what that is, a brief overview. We'll then look at how safety planning can be applied specifically to follow-up calls, and then how it may be applied in chats. We will then look at the My3 app that Naomi Carey recently wrote a blog about, and she will share a bit about a particular app, and then we will hear about how it can be applied at a center. And then, of course, we will receive some safety planning feedback. So that's what we will be doing in today's webinar. So once you hear from me services in Missouri, Amelia Leto will follow. She's currently the Resource and Crisis Helpline Coordinator at Common Ground, and she will cover the application in chat. And then we will hear from Naomi Carey, our own training practices coordinator, and then finally Amy Bates, follow-up coordinator at D.D. Hirsch out in California, will wrap things up for us. So first, what is a safety plan? What are we talking about? This is all based on a more formal structure that a few years ago was designed by Barbara Stanley and Greg Brown, I believe 2008. So their official safety plan guide includes 6 particular steps, and this was designed to be conducted and developed in person with someone, but of course we know that it can be applied very successfully over the phone and as in chats. So it is in general a list of coping strategies and resources that someone can turn to during a suicidal crisis or perhaps just ideation. It gives a sense of control. It's intended to be easy to use and include the caller's own words. It's very much an agreement, so they are part of that understanding. They're reading to this agreement, and it's to encourage a commitment to coping and, of course, therefore staying alive and taking the steps that are available to them. And it outlines basically the idea of survival and counteracting, troubling them to that suicidal ideation. So what is included in a safety plan? Of course, as we know, it is an identification of triggers. Now, triggers for an individual can be internal or external. That's one way of understanding it. The internal triggers are perhaps feelings of being bored or overwhelmed or nervous. That could be something that isn't visible to others, but the person is very aware of it, and it can be some. An external trigger perhaps is not getting a grade that they were hoping for, able to pay the or find a job, other things that might say to them, the way that the person then hears message can be a trigger. The warning signs are also included. So what is a sign of someone having increased symptoms? This could be someone suddenly not attending class, suddenly not showing up for work. Maybe they are drinking or using substances more often. Those might be warning signs that can be noted by the individual and also others around them. The management of techniques are or troubled, perhaps reading, exercising, going for a walk, those types of things. They can perhaps do at any time that's need to. Contact information for supportive people in their life. This could also be understood as more of an external resource. So who can they call upon when needed? Friends, family, people, maybe neighborhood, comfortable checking in with, and of course professional support. Who do they have that they might be able to make an appointment with and reach out to? And then of course we want to have a plan of when emergency help can be accessed if needed. So that is in general what is typically included in a safety plan. Let's touch on the why. Why is this needed? And why do we even have something such as, first of all, an official intervention that has shown effective. And it is an exercise, and that's one of the reasons I put that question up, that it's important to have our center staff and volunteers trained in approaching the safety plan with the caller or chat visitor, introducing it to the person. And there are, I'm sure, a variety of creative ways that you all do that, so it doesn't seem off-putting to the individual. It is also empowering to the person we are hoping to help. It really gives them the opportunity to tell a story and identify the way they see them and talk about the activities that help them. It can be a very empowering tool. And thirdly, it's encouraging. It helps to allow someone to feel less lost, more clear of what access, things that they could do in their own home, and people that they can reach out to. And knowing how to do that in a moment of crisis is very encouraging to that person. Let's also review a bit about what a safety plan is not. In the past, there was a reference to no outside contracts or the language of contracting or safety. So this is just something to be aware of, that safety planning is really quite different. It's much more of a collaborative agreement. Someone, and the word contract in itself, of course, can seem a bit coercive and imply that there would be some type of consequences if someone not keep their end of it, for instance, and we're coming from. In the past, contracts were more about asking someone to promise live, not so much telling them, offering them up with an agreed method and strategy. So that's not helpful. Also, make the counselor or the helper feel a little bit more relieved. They are comfortable with what is being discussed. That will, of course, for a better outcome. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. A better approach in general, again, is to develop something in a collaborative manner, and this really goes back to what we started with this year with one of our core best practices of good contact, and collaborative problem solving. So just really developing that rapport with someone in a way where they are comfortable exploring some options and allowing them to talk about what they think would be most useful and not forcing the issue. Sometimes a safety plan, we might see it very clearly, but that person might not be there yet. So we want to also offer some rationale for why this is being did, its intention is, and frankly, they can call it whatever they want. We are calling it a SAM because we have to call it something, what it is being identified as, but they refer to it in any way they wish, and that might even be part of the conversation. And it is something we want to encourage to be written down. It is intended to be written down there is actually a form, as many of you are aware of, with the 6 steps. I've also seen it condensed to 5 steps, actually, with the different types of that people can reach out to. But either way, it was originally designed to be written down. In this case, we encourage it over the phone and in chat for someone to have it available to them in the future. So that's something to think about. So in conclusion, in terms of this overview of safety planning, basically, again, we want to, in a collaborative way, approach this development of a plan and agreement with someone at risk after there has been a full risk assessment done. So this is something to just keep in mind. It is not really going to typically be appropriate for members to mute your lines, thanks. It may not be appropriate for someone at imminent risk because at that point, if more of an emergency intervention is deemed to be necessary based on the risk assessment and what's being reported, then we want to get to that intervention. And a safety plan, a formal safety plan, really might not fit until perhaps after that emergency intervention has been handled. We've talked about it being a collaborative approach, of course, that engages the person at risk, and we want them to own what they are contributing to so they can address their own personal concerns in a way that's for them. And really, you can ask the person, how likely is it that this will really be useful to you? Should we perhaps come up with something a bit different? We want to check in that the person feels like it will make sense to them when they do it later. So that is our summary of safety planning, and I would like to now get to our first presenter in terms of our center presenters, and that is going to be Emily Piet, and I'll share a little bit about Emily. Emily is an LCSW, and she is the program director for Hope After with Life Crisis Services of Provident Incorporated in St. Louis, Missouri. She has been a clinician with Life Crisis since 2012 and was previously a practicum student at the center. Emily has past experience in dialectical behavioral therapy as well as case management with adults with chronic mental illness. DBT is always a great skill. So we're happy to have Emily present, and I will hand it over to you, Emily. Go right ahead.
All right. Thank you, Karen. So again, my name is Emily, and I'm with Life Crisis Services. Just a little bit about our center. We're in St. Louis, Missouri. Oh, back on the other slide, sorry. We're one of the oldest hotlines in the nation. We were founded in 1966, and we've been merged with a local agency, Provident, in 2003. We were one of the first hotlines to receive a 5-year certification from the American Association of Suicidology. And we handle a few different crisis lines. One is Life Crisis Services, our local line. We also answer for Lifeline in much of Missouri, but we also get some Kansas, Iowa, and Nebraska calls. In addition, we have a social support website called Feelings of Blue for people who are experiencing depression, anxiety, and other forms of mental illness. And we have a hotline specifically for those members. And then we're also backed a couple other local lines. Safe Connections is the domestic violence hotline, and then Kids Under 21 helpline. Our hotline is answered by crisis workers who are trained volunteers and students, as well as some master's level clinicians, and we supervise the crisis workers as well. And we handle about 80 to 100 calls each day, about 10 to 15% of which are suicidal. So that's a little bit about our center. Next slide, please. So we were awarded a SAMHSA grant in 2013 to expand our follow-up program. We already were doing follow-up with all of our suicidal callers on our hotline. We would call them back 2, 3, sometimes more times than that to make sure that their risk has de-escalated and take appropriate actions as needed. So when we got the SAMHSA grant, we decided to create Hope After. And Hope After is free telephonic case management, and it's for adults who have experienced suicidal thoughts or have had past attempts. What it looks like is we assign them a case manager who calls them weekly, and usually the program lasts about 1 to 3 months to be short-term goal-oriented, and the goals are to decrease the suicide risk and connect them to longer-term services. So that might look like getting them into counseling or a psychiatrist, whatever they're kind of needing at the time. Next slide, please. So we get our referrals of clients 3 different ways. A majority of our clients come through our crisis lines. Like I said, we already were doing follow-ups with our suicidal callers, and once they have de-escalated, that's when we introduce Hope After and see if they're interested. We also get referrals from 3 local hospitals, their inpatient units, and also from Crisis Intervention Team police officers in St. Louis County. Once we get the referral, we will call the client the next day to try to set up an intake and get services started for them. Next slide, please. So safety planning is a big part of what we do in Hope After. It's introduced in the intake along with our suicide risk assessment, brief mood survey. We do a brief biography and a few other things to kind of get to know the client better. We use the same model that Karen was talking about, the Barbara Stanley and Greg Brown safety plan model. Although we do it in intake, it is a working document, so it can be updated throughout the months if they identify some new triggers or some new coping skills, some new supports. So it's not set in stone. However, once we do it in the intake, we do mail a hard copy out to them. And we've heard from some clients that they keep it in their purse or they keep it somewhere else that's accessible so that they can look at it between sessions if they are in crisis. And this just kind of gives clients still a plan to use when they are in crisis. We try to do the planning when they're not in crisis, so and they can identify more support so that when they are in crisis mode, they can just pick up the piece of paper and look at it there. Next slide, please. Example that we made up, we've changed all names and numbers and everything, so it's confidential, just kind of what it might look like. And again, this is collaborative. We would ask them for their ideas before we start exploring and suggesting some things. And it's also handy that we know they've already been through a crisis, so if they have trouble thinking of some things, we can ask, well, what were your warning signs this last time? So for this client, some warning signs, some early warning signs that they might be headed towards a crisis include loss of interest in things, trouble concentrating, negative thoughts that won't go away, noticing differences in the mirror, flaws that they didn't notice before, and also that these trigger deeper thoughts of an ended relationship. So once they recognize those things, the first step they go to is the internal coping skills, things they can do on their own. This client identified reading, meditating, listening, singing, and dancing to music. Next slide, please. So if step 2 doesn't help enough to de-escalate the situation, the next step is step 3, people in social settings that can provide distraction. So this client identified a couple individuals, AA meeting, a park near their house. So not necessarily people in places that they have to talk about what's going on, but just might provide a distraction, a safe place to get away to. If that doesn't work, they move on to step 4. People they can actually talk to about what's going on. This included their AA sponsor and some of their friends, their mother. We also asked them if they have children or pets or other responsibilities like that. Who could they call to help with those responsibilities in a time of crisis, just in case they do need to go to a doctor or a hospital or just get a break. So this client identified that their sister could help out with their kids. Next slide, please. And so, again, if they go through those first few steps and that doesn't work, they move on to step 5, which is their professional supports. They identified their doctor, their therapist. We always put an urgent care center there. We identify what the closest one is to them and put down the address and phone number. And we also put the lifeline number on there too, so that they have somebody that they can talk to 24 hours a day. We don't have 24-hour staff with Hope After, but we do on the crisis line. We also point out that the crisis line is in step 5 and not step 1 or 2. So that encourages them to try their other natural supports and their natural coping skills before calling the crisis line if they're able to. And that has been helping with some of our repeat callers to help them use the line more effectively. And then step 6 is ways to make their environment more safe. So examples are giving the pills to their mom and asking them to only give as many as needed. So instead of having the whole bottle around, just having 1 or 2, making sure all the knives are put away and stay out of the kitchen. Next slide, please. So again, that was just a brief overview of Hope After and how we implement safety planning with our clients. If you have any questions or anything else, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was a nice detailed example, and I think the Hope After program, again, as I mentioned to you, is very interesting in itself. So we can definitely welcome some thoughts about that later, and feel free to contact Emily there. And we will now shift to this type of safety planning application in a chat type of service. Amelia Leto is our next speaker. She is the Resource and Crisis Helpline Coordinator of Suicide Prevention at Common Ground. And she is, let me get to her slide. Well, we're going to hear from Common Ground. And Amelia, they help people move from crisis to hope through a variety of programs and services in Oakland County, Michigan. Her position serves several functions, ultimately supporting those intimately affected by suicide. In this role, she supervises the Resource and Crisis Helpline via phones, chat, and text as part of the coordinator team, which provides guidance, support, and training to their volunteers and interns. Through her work, she offers outreach, support, and information to those bereaved by suicide through their Survivors of Suicide Loss program. Amelia specializes in suicide prevention and postvention on the local, state, and national levels through a variety of trainings, advocacy, and innovative technology. So we welcome Amelia Leto from Common Ground.
Thank you so much, Karen, for the introduction and invitation to present today. If you are unfamiliar with Common Ground, we are a 24-hour resource and crisis intervention agency in Oakland County. We were founded in 1971 by a group of students, parents, and community leaders who were concerned about today's youth. Today, Common Ground serves upwards of 70,000 people within our community, and we also have reached out to a partner county to provide crisis intervention and recovery services on a small basis. And we provide this through a variety of ways, but our front door is the Resource and Crisis Helpline. We now provide crisis intervention services through phones, chat, and text. Just a brief history of our chat services. We founded them in May of 2012. We went national with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline in June, and we have exchanged 7,327 chats to date. And this offers a diversity in our crisis response. We found great success offering these services on the local and national levels. We are also accredited through AAS, in addition to newly accredited through the Contact USA board, and we are very proud to serve on both. The next slide, thank you. So, what's the benefit? What are the pros of chats versus calls? We know that all conversations are confidential and anonymous, but the benefit of coming on to chat takes away that person-to-person voice interaction that some people may find intimidating. They may feel there is a perceived tone or a judgment on the other end of the line. So their comfort level is reaching out to us through chat. And they can do that anywhere, anytime with a good, solid Wi-Fi connection. So the benefit of the safety plan, it's visually appealing. Over the phone, we introduce it, and the person isn't always in the right frame of mind or has the ability to write down a specific plan. But we found that people are more willing and able to collaborate on this safety plan in our chat services. It's through written word. There's a certain amount of fluidity to it. It is an ease of introducing the safety plan. And we work to engage and support the chatter. It offers them a sense of purpose. They have some goals to work towards that they may not have otherwise been introduced to or been familiar with. They may be able to share this with others in their life, whether it be a friend, a family member, or a professional network to build onto the safety plan beyond just that one chat interaction. So it empowers the chatter to utilize this. It's a tangible frame of reference. They are able to print it off or copy and save the conversation onto a smartphone, which many of us have access to now, and they can have it for that personal use or, again, to share it with others and build on to the plan and to have it with them if they find themselves in crisis again or just need a reminder that they've thought about these types of situations or concerns before, and they can look at that and say, look, I have this with me. I'm able to do this. I thought of this beforehand. I mean, we do these safety drills in class. This is another safety drill, and it's a tangible one to take away from the conversation. So the relief for the specialist, we have volunteers and interns and staff who are genuinely involved and concerned with the individuals. And it allows the specialist to consider how they're going to respond. They are able to enter into this conversation, with all the helping and the willingness and the supportiveness that they bring with them, and they can work to engage that texter or that chatter. And again, the ease of introduction, they can insert it at any time. It's insertable into our empathy model. We follow the Kaplan model here, and it can be done at any point in the intervention, and it works to collaboratively problem solve with that chatter. Next slide. Thank you. So the cons, the resistance to the idea. Does the chatter have the ability, the willingness, the ableness to engage in the safety plan? Oftentimes we found that they're not familiar with the idea of the safety plan, so the specialist has that ability to explain it. They can clearly share and review the safety plan being used. We utilize the Stanley and Brown model, as we've talked about, and we also utilize the ASSIST model. So with it being on chat, we can copy and paste word for word. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline website is a great tool to click and share with our chatters. And oftentimes we share that they can print it out. They can print out the entire thing and fill it out as it's presented instead of that kind of cafeteria style, what's going to work for them, what's not. So they just may be unfamiliar with the idea of it. Again, we can share with them what it is, what the goal is, and break it down if they're not familiar with the term safety planning. This is a goal setting to keep yourself safe for today. Is this something you're willing to talk with us about? There's the concern of the lack of depth and tone. We don't hear a voice. We don't hear the cadence in their tone. We're not sure of their sincerity. And ultimately, we have to take them at their word. And we found that in these chats, we learn to hear that chatter's voice. We can hear what they're saying and how they're saying. There's a certain style that people have when they are at higher risk or a medium risk or a lower risk. So we begin to hear that as you get comfortable on chat. And for the specialist, the concern is that the texter or chatter doesn't follow through. Again, this is a specialist concern. It's a personal concern to the person involved in sharing with this chatter, and follow-up isn't as fluid on chat. We can't at this time send out a chat and say, hey, how are you doing? We would have to offer, and we have offered, to follow up through a call, which the chatter isn't always comfortable with. But it is an option, and it has been presented in chats, and we have followed up with those that have agreed to a callback. Can we have the next slide, please? So, as you may be aware, this is portions of the Stanley and Brown model. We are an Assist Train center, thanks to that SAMHSA NSPL grant for the Train the Trainers. We train all of our staff, volunteers, and interns on the Resource and Crisis Helpline in Assist. And we utilize the safety plan, and we're transitioning into the new Assist 11 Safety for Now. But this highlights some of those key points that we're looking for with our chat and the benefits of using chat. So we recognize the warning signs. We have the ability to have that pre-chat survey, which some of the questions asked are, what are your main concerns? What's bringing you in tonight? Do you have any thoughts of suicide? And if they're having thoughts of suicide, what's that time frame? Is it within 24 hours? Has it been within the last 2 months, etc.? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how upset are you? And then those general demographics. But the benefit is that information that we have as soon as they pop in. So we know that if they don't bring up suicide right away, that we're going to ask that shortly after and do a risk assessment for them. We also talk about the coping strategies, what kind of stress relief works for the person. We personalize it for each chatter, what soothes them, what makes them feel good, what helps distract them, their own self-care, and reframing that into that self-care mind. Self-care is good for all of us, all of the time. It's really important to introduce that and get familiar with it and encourage it in others. Another point of self-care is our support systems. We know that socializing with others, connecting with them, and utilizing those support systems can be really important in a suicidal crisis. So we encourage those on our chat to connect with their family, connect with friends, their school, their work, whatever is purposeful to them, as well as introducing professional supports where it's appropriate. Are they interested in mental health care? Have they received mental health care in the past? What's accessible to them? And ensuring a safe environment. Throughout that, we're doing that imminent risk assessment. We're making sure that we're ensuring their suicidal ideation. What are their plans? Do they have access to the plans? And what's that time frame? Is it within 24 hours? Making sure that we're addressing those immediate needs, if there are any, to ensure their safety while we're doing this contracting. And again, I believe I shared, but the use of the Stanley and Brown method, we can share that with the person. We can share the link and they can save it to their desktop, use it for another point, or share with others. And the next slide, please. And this is one of our wonderful specialists. I took this and edited it for privacy privacy purposes. The specialist here, this is just an excerpt from a conversation, but I think it shows a good use of the safety planning and how it can be utilized. So the specialist shares here that they are introducing the safety plan and what the purpose of it is. They're encouraging those coping strategies that the chatter had shared with them previously and encouraging them to utilize those. We're introducing the idea of self-care and reframing it for the person to take care of themselves tonight. We're here in the now. We're going to get through tonight, and tomorrow's another day. They give great feedback, that sounds good, encouraging the person to reach out to those support systems in their network. And then they summarize the importance of those social supports, the great use. There's great use of strength IDs, and our specialists here took the opportunity to introduce additional resources that the chatter may connect with and bring into part of their safety plan. And then confirmation that they're on the same page. This is run by the chatter, and they're, depending on the flow of the conversation, that style of the conversation, the specialist may have to take a more direct or provide more guidance onto what that might look like. Is this something you could try? Would you agree to X, Y, Z? And ultimately give the power to the chatter to utilize what's presented. Next slide, please. This information was provided to you by the letters J and A. My work wife, Jen James, wasn't able to be with us today, but that is her with the red nose, and that's me with the glasses. And you can reach us on the next slide at our direct extensions and through our emails if you would like to learn more, have a chat, dress up. We're here. Thank you so much. I look forward to the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Amelia. Tell Jen we say hello. And I apologize for my tongue-tied start to your introduction earlier, but we do appreciate all of the information that you shared. And of course, as we know, there are many parallels between applying a safety planning intervention to calls, whether it's an initial call or a follow-up call, compared to chats. But there are some things to be aware of, some distinctions. So I think that was a great highlight of that. And we might have some other questions that come later or comments about that. But again, you have contact information here for Amelia and Jen at Common Ground. And I believe we will see you also at NASCOD. So great, thank you. Let's transition to our next speaker. And this will be covered by Naomi Carey here at the but we are happy to have Naomi talk with us a bit about the My3 app, which of course is the safety plan in the new app format. So Naomi, go right ahead.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. Actually, as Amelia was talking, I thought this was a great transition because this really seems like it would be a good thing to introduce during a chat, possibly. As you were saying that you send links, this could be another link you think about using. So basically, this is an app specifically geared towards safety planning. And you can see the website here, my3app.org, so it's pretty easy to remember. And next slide, please. So basically, what are the benefits of creating this app, and why would someone go and develop an app for safety planning? The main reasons were that, the information can be easily stored and privately stored. It's with you when you need it most. It's easily accessible, and you can update it and review it quickly. The access to the resources is right at your fingertips, and there's also direct dial for emergency assistance. And then crisis hotlines can really use this as a way to elicit resources and support and to encourage ongoing development with the treating clinician. And can complete it before ending the contact with any at-risk caller. And it's basically easy to review and revise if you're using it during a follow-up call. Next slide, please. So I want to tell you a little bit about how this was developed so you can see that it wasn't just slapped together. It went through a very thoughtful process when it was developed in California. Basically, the original idea came out of Santa Clara County and their local suicide intervention work group, which is comprised of suicide attempt survivors. And in 2011, this work group had this idea to create an app that would help people stay connected to their support networks and, looking at the safety plan, would they, have a situation where they were experiencing suicidal thoughts. And at that same time, the California Mental Health Services Authority was implementing a statewide suicide prevention, different statewide suicide prevention projects funded by California's Mental Health Services Act. And one of the projects was included a statewide awareness and education campaign called Know the Signs. And so they basically worked together and they took on, this Know the Signs campaign took on the responsibility of funding and developing and disseminating this app statewide. And then sort of having this group in Santa Clara County, this work group advise them on the features. And then they brought in also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline to sort of provide further advice around the features. And then we were approached also to basically take on this app once the California Mental Health Services Authority could no longer sort of maintain it. They asked us if we would take it on, and we were happy to do so. So it's now officially maintained by the Lifeline. Next slide, please. So from the suicide attempt survivors' perspective, they really gave some clear information that the app needed to be uncluttered and easy to use, and it also needed to provide someone with an easy way to connect to their supports quickly. Next slide. So basically, this also was based on the plan we've all been talking about. This Barbara Stanley and Greg Brown's template was sort of adapted into these 3 sections. So they took this template and put it into sort of smaller bits on the app itself. So if you go to the next slide, I can show you each one. So first there's this main page, and on this page you can add 3 primary contacts. So that's individualized. And then it also comes preloaded with buttons to either call 911 or call the Lifeline. Next slide. So then you have this next part of it, which is the safety plan. And you can see that it has essentially all of the areas in the tiered plan that we talked about before. And this is completely, edited. You can edit it in any way and personalize it in any way you want. So this is something that would be individualized based on the person creating it. And it can also be emailed. Next slide, please. So the final part of it is that you can also add a bunch of resources that you personally want to have on hand, depending on your own needs. And you can choose those for yourself. So that is another nice feature. Next slide. Oh, I guess that's all I had to say. But this is just to, give you a sense of the actual app, how to access it, and then Amy is going to talk more about how it's been used at her crisis center. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Naomi, for that review. Again, if you hadn't noticed the blog that was posted a few weeks ago now by Naomi. It also touches on this My3 app. And there was also a blog during this month on safety planning written by Gloria Jeter at H2H here in New York City. So just to offer those reminders. Okay, so as Naomi mentioned, we are going to hear a bit more about this, how this app is applied at the center level as well. So Amy Bayless is joining us again from D.D. Hirsch. She presented on our webinar for Continuity of Care last month. She has been in the field of suicide prevention since 2003, starting as a volunteer at the San Francisco Suicide Prevention Center, and after completing her graduate certification in coaching from John F. Kennedy University, she returned to her native Southern California roots and joined D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Services in 2006. She is in the process now of completing her master's in counseling psychology and writing her master thesis. She also runs the Suicide Prevention Center's Crisis Follow-Up Services program. Highlights of her career have been presenting with her team at this year's AAS conference on their short-term follow-up and assisting in the best practice development and facilitation of the Survivors of Suicide Attempts support group. So again, we are happy to welcome Amy Bayless. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to present on this app because before I knew it was invented, I was like, oh, I need to learn how to make a technology like this because I knew it would be so important for callers. So I'm happy to talk about how we use it here. So it was a great introduction. So you already know a little bit about D.D. Hirsch. We've been running a crisis line since 1958, so probably one of the first crisis lines in the nation. And part of accredited by AAS and Contact USA, as well as a member of the Lifeline Network. So you can go ahead and go next slide. So hopefully from what I present today that you'll get a good overview of how we implemented using the My3 app, as well as discuss some of the challenges of using the app and safety planning in general, and present some feedback on how the app has been helpful for our callers. And we also use the app and it's a support group for our suicide attempt survivors too, so I'm going to be able to talk a little bit about how that app has been effective with that group. So initially we did sort of a soft launch on the app within the follow-up program. I think always, when you're launching sort of a new thing, it's helpful to have a sort of a smaller team just to kind of work out the kinks and kind of, is this helpful? What is it like to use this? Kind of come up with your own sort of best practices of how is this going to be effective within the crisis center. So I have a team of 3 amazing follow-up counselors that work with me, and so we were able to kind of test out the app initially because we'd been using safety planning for a while now and been mailing out a paper copy or emailing it, and so we wanted to switch over to what is it like to use a phone app for that. And then once we kind of got comfortable with it, we did an in-service training for all of our crisis line staff, which includes volunteers and as well as supervisors that help out on the crisis line. And so it was helpful having the team there because they were already familiar with the app and kind of knew how to use it. And so the whole focus was safety planning, and then we featured, using the My3 app. And during the training, we had the counselor sit down and practice what it was like using the app to complete a safety plan. And so they did sort of a role play if one was a caller and one was a counselor, just to get them comfortable using this an actual phone call rather than just go, here it is, and send them out on the crisis line and, have them learn on the job, give them a chance to practice it. And so something we've been doing is trying to promote it on a regular basis. And I think the best key to using it is encouraging everyone to download it for themselves so that you can use it on yourself, practice with it, get comfortable with it, and see how it works. So next slide, please. So one of the things, and Barbara Mears, who's an amazing counselor on the lines, she kind of helped me a little bit with this presentation because she uses it a lot. And her suggestion was kind of finding the right time to bring it up during the call, especially those who've been working on the crisis line for a while. You kind of have your own pattern in what you're used to doing, and what was really helpful is kind of finding a way in. And so if a caller was talking about triggers or how to distract themselves, a suggestion was like, oh, speaking of that, I have a tool that might be helpful. And that was sort of a great in to presenting, that there is this My3 app that would be helpful. So one of the things that we found helpful on the call was to download it while they were on the phone. I know it's not always possible, so we had to make sure that they were able to put it on speakerphone or use a headset, and coaching them through the process. So it does require the crisis counselor to be a little bit comfortable with the technology of it, but again, it was kind of helpful to get the caller buy-in right there, and we have done this on the phone, so it is possible to do. One of the drawbacks is those callers that don't have a smartphone, we would redirect them to the website, so we didn't want to introduce something to them and then make them feel bad. Oh, sorry, you don't have a smartphone? Ooh, here, go to the website. At least there was sort of a backup tool that they could use instead. And then it was also kind of a great distraction for someone, giving them something to do, giving them some direction in a way that would be helpful for them. So sort of the suggestion is, you're having problems sleeping, or you need something, something else to do. So, why don't you try downloading the app and start working on the safety plan. The next slide, please. So some of the challenges is, one, technology. When you would put in the App Store, typing in My3, there was another app that would come up first, and it was in a different language, and so we had to kind of get used to kind of coaching the callers. Oh, it's what it looks like with this, and it's kind of a lighter background. Also with technology, sometimes you might not be able to find it on the store, or maybe somebody's having an internet connection issue, so they're not going to be able to download it. So that was sort of a difficulty that occasionally you can encounter. And then also there's the socioeconomic limitation, somebody that doesn't have a phone, or their phone's contract's not active, or they don't have enough data, that type of thing. So we didn't want to discourage them from not using it, but again, then we would refer them to the website. So some of the other challenges is, does add extra time to a crisis call, going through, downloading the app, filling out each step, all of that. So, especially crisis centers are busy enough as it is, and adding this extra step to calls would be a little bit difficult. So that was sort of one of the drawbacks to using this app while on the crisis line call. So if we were kind of running out of time, we really encourage them to use this app with their therapist, especially, doing the safety plan, so they could work on it on their own. And we have a great follow-up program, so the counselor could always offer a follow-up call if the caller was really interested in completing safety planning and using the app, and that we would work with them on it on the follow-up call. Another drawback that would occasionally happen is, you start kind of focusing on the safety plan, and one of the first things is triggers, and so they would start, re-escalating, or maybe they get frustrated with their phone or whatever, and, the caller's kind of back in that crisis mode, and so you had to kind of put that aside at the moment and table that discussion and, refocus on de-escalating the caller. Next slide, please. So another thing that had happened with using this app and just sort of safety plans in general is some of the questions on it are a little bit triggering or upsetting for the callers. The first one was, my network, and often people would feel really upset if I don't have anybody to talk to. The only place I have to call is the crisis line. And so kind of encouraging them to identify some other people. And then, adding the crisis line, as that already has a national lifeline, but a lot of crisis lines have their additional, the local number too. So we would kind of give them a head start of, how about, putting us in as one of your contacts, and then, just having them identify one more. Because again, that was kind of upsetting for them of, I don't have anyone to contact, but yet it was an important step in doing the safety plan and in the My3 app. And then another step that was also can be triggering for callers is keeping myself safe. There's talking about access to their means, and often when we get to the step with callers, they wouldn't be really ready to talk about getting rid of their means, and so that was again another step that was hard for them to really identify over the phone. And one of the things that was expressed is that having access to their means is a comfort. So just sort of giving you guys a perspective of what we've come up with using the app. And, other centers might have different experiences. So go ahead and next slide. So we started using it in June of 2014. And as of the first week of October, there's potential about 16,000 callers that I estimated could have been using this app, might qualify for it in that they weren't at imminent risk or they weren't at no risk for suicide. And that's what I could find in the call reports. It was only mentioned in about 70 call reports, and 39 of those were for one counselor. And so, one counselor was really on board and found it a very useful and effective tool, and her feedback was that she wished more people would use it, which I agree with. So, we're kind of already seeing a little bit of resistance of counselors not using it, and I think some of it, not all of them attended the training. I think they also kind of forget that it's a useful tool that we have. Another feedback that we've got from callers who use it is they're kind of concerned with confidentiality with apps. I know there's a lot of apps that access information on the background, or they were kind of a little bit reluctant because the app wanted access to their contacts. And so of just kind of reassuring them that the app was safe and secure and that it wasn't accessing other data and sending it to an unknown site. So that was, a concern that they had. One of the other things is that there are some other safety plan apps out there, and I've downloaded them, and they ask for your email address. And so that was the first step to logging in, was to give them an email address. And so even I was like, why do they want my email address? And the My3 app does not require that. It's just an initial agreement page for the people that use it. And other than that, it's not asking for other personal information. Okay, next slide. So we've also used this app for our suicide attempt survivors group. We started marketing a group in 2011, and we used a printed safety plan kind of starting officially in May of 2013. And then when the app came out, we introduced it to them, and they found it very helpful and very convenient. Some of the feedback just in safety plan in general is finding ways to identify ways to take their mind off of suicide, and also identifying people to ask for help when they're having thoughts. And the My3 app is great for that. Next slide. So at some point in the SOSA group, we did a focus group to getting feedback from them of what was helpful. And a lot of them were using the safety plan just sort of organically. And so having sort of a practical application that broke it down was helpful for them, and that they really liked the ability that the safety plan is to made it more personable, and that they liked being able to update it on an ongoing basis to have it remain relevant. And again, the My3 app is so useful for that because you can edit the safety plan steps at any time. Next slide. So just feedback in general about the My3 app from the SOSA group members. Again, we started using it in February 2014, and they really love how convenient it is, that it's discreet. Before they were carrying around a piece of paper that had, suicide on it, and so here it is, something easy just to download on your phone. It just says My3. everybody has their phone with them all the time, so it was great and convenient for them. They found it very easy to update. Also great distraction for them if they're feeling triggered, that they can go and work through the safety plan steps. And then also the convenient feature of once you complete the safety plan, you can email it. And so some of the clients have used it and filled it out and emailed it to their therapist to work more on it in their session. Okay, next slide. So this is my contact info, and again, you know, I don't mind if you bug me with questions or concerns. I love talking about the app and how we've used it, so do feel free to reach out to me if you have anything that you want to clarify.
Great. Thank you, Amy. That was very informative. I think the review as well as the feedback portion is very useful to always hear about the feedback from those that we are sharing these tools with. And I like at one point you mentioned as a reminder that the My3 app is something you can make a note of to a third-party caller. That they can always make use of it too to help someone in need that they are concerned about, and that might make them feel empowered to have that type of tool. Okay, very good. So again, this is Amy's contact information if you'd like to reach out to her separately. But this does conclude the presentation with the speakers. So at this time, we can open it up for some comments, questions for any of the speakers, Emily, Amelia, Naomi, Amy, or myself. Just a couple quick resources. Obviously, for Lifeline centers, we have the Network Resource Center, and there is a safety planning page that you can easily link to. There's a lot of, I think there's a summary sheet on there, and there is a training video that you can watch, as well as some other links that I think are worth taking a peek at if you haven't already. This second link is a recent article that happens to highlight the app as well. Just I happened to see that, and just wanted to make you aware of that if you want to check it out. I'm also going to open up our second poll question. So let me go to that, and I can always go back to any of these slides if needed. Okay. Okay, let's see. So you're going to see another poll question, and if you could take a moment, those of you still on, to go ahead and answer that portion of the poll question, that would be great. Okay, I see a couple things. So yes, you can definitely get a copy of the slides, and this is being recorded, so the plan is to have it uploaded to the Network Resource Center for those who could not watch it live. We have all of our Lifeline webinars on the Network Resource Center on the webinars page, which is currently under the training tab. So if you ever have trouble finding anything, let me know. We have most of them recorded and up there. If not, we definitely have the slides, which will be included in our announcements upcoming. And the app available. So yes, you can download the app on either the iPhone or on an Android device. And I see that Amy took that question. Very good. So feel free also to use your voices, those of you on the line, if you want to chime in, anything that you'd like to ask or comment about. I very much enjoyed hearing from each presenter, but I, of course, worked with them as well, so I want to give others an opportunity. Well, thank you to those who are filling out the poll question. Looks like so far the My3 app review and center use was very much appreciated. I know that's the latest and greatest thing. Who won? Well, let's see. You know, we're all winners, Amelia. And yeah, so far it looks like the My3 app review and center use was most useful based on the full scope of information. Safety planning, of course, is not new, but it's definitely deserving of our ongoing attention and making sure staff and volunteers are trained and are aware of how to implement these new types of tools that become available. Let's see, we have a question regarding the effectiveness of safety planning. There is some information, Allison, that you could probably see on the Network Resource Center related to Barbara Stanley and Greg Brown's development of this particular safety planning model and the training that's available there. If you have any further questions, email me offline or, of course, give me a buzz. And I really do appreciate everyone's participation today. We had a good number of folks on, and I just want to, I understand that some people will have to log off soon. I always reserve a full hour and a half, but we sometimes are able to get through the presentation in an hour. And if there aren't other comments or questions, I'll just take this opportunity again to remind everyone about the different blogs that you can access and the variety of information on the Network Resource Center, in this case the safety planning page as I referenced earlier. We always want to highlight different centers in these webinars as well as our blogs. So if there is something that you are comfortable sharing and want to make known to the network and you believe it would be useful to others, to your peers, just let us know. As I said earlier, next month we'll focus on noteworthy callers as well as chat visitors. So any policies, procedures, and approaches, even if it's a technological strategy that you have found to be helpful in serving those types of callers in a more effective way, whether it's a repeat caller or someone that might be misusing the line or chat service, get in touch with me. I'd love to talk with you and see if we can get you on the next webinar. I think these guys can attest it's nothing too painful. It could be somewhat fun to collaborate and be able to share with your network of peers. You're welcome, Amelia. I really appreciate everyone's attention and participation today, especially to our speakers. And if you have answered the poll, looks like my 3-app review is still going strong. Thank you so much, and feel free to exit the call when you're ready. Yes, Amy. Amy, I'm happy to provide a trophy of some. It might be homemade, but yes. So thank you, everyone. We will connect soon, whether it's at the next conference or the next call or meeting. Bye-bye now.